No, he's actually on his way to SCAG. So it's Bill.
It's a retreat
Yeah, didn't he send us
Sounds like he's gonna have a lot of fun over there. Go see my boss there.
Did you just declare us, I asked you if the meeting's over, did you just declare
No,
us done?
because he said that's,
Good morning.
No.
Just got about 10 seconds.
Got a good crowd today.
what time do you start the recording back? Right, the meeting starts, right?
Just whenever, just right.
We can start
How are you?
Suppose some people could look at it like that.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Should we go ahead and get started? Wayne and Phil send their regrets. They're on their way to SCAG to brief them on the AQMP. So I'll be your chair this morning. Kurt's assistant. So great to see everybody. So as you know, the next board meeting is at the Mission Inn, followed by the Clean Air Awards. And some of the board members may be doing an optional tour the night before of the CSERT facility at UC Riverside and the site for the future ARB lab. So if your board members haven't RSVP'd, they need to do so.
As Riverside resident, I highly recommend the tour of CSERT. It's like way cool,
Yeah, it's a really, really great
especially if you're a nerd. Hopefully we're all nerds.
And he's buying dinner after.
And dinner's on your own, so we'll do that. Okay. So
Probably
if you'd like,
hydrogen or something.
Now we're talking.
We can use their charbroiler technology to make our own burgers.
Yeah, there you go.
did that many, many days when we were working on the restaurant.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they would always have whatever they cooked. And they actually had a good program where they donated it to a local shelter of some sort.
Those were the old Joe Moore back then.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so our convention, I guess, is to start with the public hearings. So those are on page 10. And the first item, Matt's going to briefly address the BACT guidelines, give you an update on that.
So we had made a commitment in the Stationary Source Committee due to some comments by members of the Scientific Review Committee that we would continue to work with stakeholders. We would call another Scientific Review Committee, which we did and held this past Tuesday, but we made a commitment that should there be significant issues still raised at the Scientific Review Committee, that we would pull the item and just work with the committee to resolve those issues. And so since they still have some concerns about the process, it's really more about the process rather than substantive comment to the guidelines. We're giving them another 30 days to make comments, so we'll bring this item back to the board in December.
So we're gonna pull it.
You go to stationary source again?
Yes.
Not to go into great detail, but what were the concerns about the process?
They are viewing so the Scientific Review Committee is an input advisory group, right? So they are to provide technical guidance on the BACT guidelines. I think many of the members are confusing the BACT with the AQMP, where it's they're treating it more like a regulatory process, where they want final approval on what goes into the guidelines. They want permitting guidance, and that's not the intent of the guidelines. So we're giving them another chance to make written comments, but we also want to make it clear that the committee is to provide technical input, not approval. So we'll see how that shakes out.
Thank you.
Well, and they were reminded, if you were not Stationary Source, they were reminded of that fact by the Stationary Source Committee as well, that they were an advisory body rather than an approving body. So we'll see how that works.
Yeah, they haven't gotten this.
Okay.
But we're giving them more time, so hopefully we'll be.
Yeah,
And my understanding was they had a lot of suggestions for the next revision of the BACT guidelines, and so we'll probably go in December with what we've done at this point, and then there'll be future revisions that we can look at some of their larger issues that they brought up. So, but there's really no reason to delay updating the guidelines to reflect all the current practices at this point, so we'll be back in December. Any other questions on that? All right, so on page 11, Susan, do you want to, I thought I saw Susan.
Back here.
There you are. About this package of rules.
So, we're bringing forward Rule 1402, and then also, some minor amendments to 1401 and 207.1, which is the fees for AB 2588. But Rule 1402 is an umbrella rule that, essentially implements AB 2588, and it applies to existing sources that have toxic emissions and requires facilities to, submit health risk assessments and, do risk reduction if they're over what we call the action risk threshold, which is 25 in a million. So the proposed rule 1402 is an overall strengthening of the rule, and it includes a voluntary risk reduction element to it that allows facilities, if they can commit to, instead of 25 in a million, to reduce below 10 in a million, that these certain facilities can participate in this voluntary program. And in lieu of that, they will do a modified public notification. They wouldn't be doing public meetings and individual letters to facilities, but we would post these facilities on our website and include it in our 2588 report, annual report. And so this was something that was brought forward when we brought the amendments to incorporate the revised OEHA guidelines in 2015. It's something that we've talked to the environmental representatives that they like that there's going to be additional reductions. These reductions in the way the program is structured will occur quicker, and they understand that there's going to be less public notification associated with that. Another major element to the proposal that we're incorporating is something what we're calling potentially high risk level facilities. And these are facilities that have health risks that we know based on emissions from a source test or from monitor data that are over 100 in a million, and we want to fast track these facilities. And so by fast tracking them, what we're going to do is we're going to ask for them to be submitting concurrent their health risk assessment, their inventory, their risk reduction plan, all at once to streamline and quicken the process. And then in addition, we're going to require that they submit what's called an early action risk reduction plan. So they start their reductions, start mitigating the high risk immediately. We're doing this already. We've done this with other facilities. Now we're just kind of codifying it into Rule 1402, this practice that we've been implementing. So we've done it for Hickson, we've done it for Exide. As we find these issues, we don't want to wait to complete all the analysis. We want to make sure that we're mitigating the high risk immediately for the ultimate public health protection. There's other streamlining elements of the rule where we could shorten the time for submittal times for the different air toxics inventory report, health risk assessment, risk reduction plans we have. The overall result will be that we will shorten the amount of the time that folks will start the risk reduction will be much sooner than the current program. And the elements in 1401 that overlap with 1402 is that we currently have a provision where we're required to report to the board every time OEHA makes a change to the risk value. What we want to do is just incorporate all these changes now in our annual 2588 report. All the changes now are very small changes, but we have a commitment in the resolution that if there is a substantial change to a risk value that would affect permitting or 2588, we would bring that to the Stationary Source Committee to update them. There's no key issues that we're aware of. We've had several working group meetings. We've been briefing the environmental groups through the process, and we had a briefing yesterday, and there are no major issues that came up when we briefed it. The one issue that we heard from the environmental group was that when we post the notification on our website, they wanted in a place in our website that's a little more prominent than deep within the 2588. And so I said that in the revision to our website, we're probably going to have these kind of rotating banners. And as we update these notifications, we can incorporate that in the rotating banner. So that's it. Any questions?
Reaction from industry, if the enviros are on board, reaction from The regulated community?
Yeah, it's the regulated community that brought the initial concept forward during the hearing for May 2015 for the revisions to the OEHA guidance, that they wanted a different option that, they felt that for facilities that are subject to the revised OEHA guidance, it's only but for the guidance, there was no increase in their emissions, but it's but for the guidance that they're gonna have this increase in their health risk, the estimated health risk. So they wanted the opportunity to make these reductions, so they could, not alarm the community, and they were willing to go below, what they would be required to do.
So the 10 and 1 million parts was their idea?
I think we kind of came up with a 10 and a million. They were talking about quicker, and then we said quicker and more, and they said okay. So, any other comments or questions?
Thank you very much. Are you also doing Reg 9?
No, Catherine, are you in Reg 9? Okay.
You probably can do it from there, because Reg
Okay.
9 is a very
So tiny.
minor,
Yeah.
it's minor item, so by the time you got up here, you'd be done.
So this item is a routine update to Reg 9 for the purpose of incorporating federal standards source actions such as the standards of performance for new stationary sources. And the purpose of this is just to incorporate all of these changes in one place so that the regulated community that is subject to these rules can find them in one place. So for this item, there are 3 new NSPS standards, and there are 5 amendments to existing standards. So these are rules that are already adopted, they're incorporated into the CFR, and so now we're just including them in Regulation 9 as an update.
There's generally no concerns about this. We usually don't get any testimony. It's just kind of something we do as a customer service, one-stop shop for the rules. Questions on that? Okay, back to Susan to talk about the amendments to reclaim.
So in December 2015, there was a motion in regards to the shutdown provisions that committed staff to go back to the working group, look at alternatives, and then try to come up with a proposal that would better align with command and control. So staff has worked with the working group and had 5 working group meetings and has come up with a proposal. Basically the proposal is the shutdown provision would apply to facility-wide shutdowns, and we're focusing on the larger facilities, which are the facilities that are identified in Rule 2002 as the Table 7 and 8 facilities. And we did a fair amount of analysis to look at the facilities that were not on Table 7 and 8. And when we look at the Table 7 and 8 facilities, on average, they represent about, their holdings are about 170 tons per year, whereas the average holdings are less than 5 tons per year for the other facilities. So there's a big, gap between those. And so we feel confident with a proposal that's going to focus on shutdown provisions for these larger facilities, and that these are the ones that we would be of greatest concern if they were to shut down, and we want to have that safeguard that would remove the RTCs from those shutdowns. So the proposal doesn't require a full forfeiture of RTCs upon shutdown, but requires that any equipment that's above the BARC level, that we would basically discount or adjust their RTCs to a BARC level. And so the result is that some facilities at the end may have some holdings, but the overwhelming majority of holdings would be we would be adjusting their holdings and would be removed from the facility. The proposal does include requirements for facilities that have a planned non-operational shutdown. So they may be temporarily shut down because they're doing a turnaround or they're doing significant modifications to their facility. And so facilities that have sort of this kind of a longer period that we understand, and they would submit a plan to us, and we would not deem them as shut down. We wouldn't remove their RTCs. We also recognize that there could be a facility that we identify that looks like they're that there was a significant drop, but they installed control equipment, and we would understand that that's not deemed as a shutdown either. There is a provision for common ownership. The facility needs to submit a declaration to our agency within 30 days from rule adoption to identify all the facilities that are within common ownership. So upon shutdown, that they can still transfer those RTCs to a parent or a sister facility. And those RTCs wouldn't be subject to the discount, but they would then become non-tradable to the company that receives them. Other provisions in terms of applicability is that it's a forward-looking proposal. There was, concerns that we were going to go retroactively for facilities in terms of, previous shutdowns. It's from the rule adoption and any facilities that shut down moving forward. There is a requirement that if a facility sold their infinite year block RTC, so the stream of RTCs into the future, and they were to shut down, we would still require that facility to reconcile and to go to the open market to purchase RTCs. And we did look at the impact of that provision and found that there's one facility, if that facility were to shut down, that would be would need to go to the open market, but the amount of RTCs that they would need would be less than a percentage of the overall market. So the impact in terms of number of facilities for that provision and the magnitude of RTCs was very small. The applicability, it's like only for facilities that received an initial allocation. So a facility that didn't have an initial allocation, they wouldn't be subject to the shutdown provision. They're not the facilities of concern in terms of when they shut down. These are facilities that every year they're having to go to the market to purchase credits because they didn't have an initial allocation. That's kind of summarizes the overall proposal, where we are right now in terms of with the business community is that they feel that the shutdown provision is just not needed. But I think in terms of us addressing, the major issues, and I think we've addressed those issues. There's probably two issues that we didn't see eye to eye, but as we showed them with the analysis of the data and explained our thinking and logic behind the provision, there was no further comments from the industry. So the two issues that they had raised that we didn't make any changes for was one was looking at these folks that had previously sold these infinite year block RTCs, and as we did the analysis and showed that the impact was very small in terms of number of facilities and the amount of RTCs, that issue was checked off. And then the other issue was that they felt that facilities that had over control below a BACT level, that they should receive some type of credit. And so what we explained as two major points was that if you had a facility that was all under BACT, it just wouldn't make sense for us to then issue RTCs upon shutdown. And the other was that as we're trying to align with new source review and ERCs, we don't give credits for facilities that are under BACT. So trying to align with the command and control BACT approach, it's like we wouldn't issue ERCs for someone that's below, we adjust to. And then the other issue on the, issuing extra RTCs for someone that does above and beyond. The program already rewards those facilities as they go through. If they're below BACT, they have the ability, for all the years that they're below BACT to sell those RTCs. We don't take those RTCs away from them and adjust those RTCs in the shutdown methodology. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One is that, excuse me, it would be useful to Dr. Liu to have some sort of a comparison between what was proposed by staff last December and the current proposal. And I know you've got a really good chart that shows it differentiates this one with traditional command and control. And maybe it's the same exact, but it should be called out as being clear. And then secondly, with respect to the decision to look at a facility-wide shutdown versus equipment shutdown, it would be useful to have a comparison in terms of what would be the impacts of one versus the other, and it would probably be more useful to him, not for staff necessarily to try and sell the approach that they've done, because I think there are pros and cons with both approaches, but to kind of provide that information that kind of shows the pros and cons there. Lastly, just a comment. This came out of probably one of the most controversial rulemakings that the district has had in a while. And I attended most, if not all, the workshops on this, and I was just extremely and thoroughly impressed by the ability of staff to craft this in the way they did, as well as to generate support for it. And in great part due in some way to the oratory skills of the acting EO, as well as just by staff's creativeness. So I just wanted to call that out, and it really resulted in something that I saw a tremendous amount of support for, which I would have never dreamed would be possible.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you, Mark. I know in this one, the business community doesn't love this, but I think that they are all saying we can live with it. I mean, as Susan mentioned, they would rather have nothing, but I think the staff did a really good job of trying to find a middle ground. And then from the environmental perspective, I know this was one of the list of things in their complaints for the lawsuit, so it takes a step in that direction. I don't know if they are fully supportive of this or not, but at least it partially addresses one of the things on their list, so.
We did brief the environmental groups. We have monthly calls, and so we did brief them yesterday. And their I can't, is Tracy here? What the exact wording was, what, where they said, but then I asked, is it, could you say it goes in the right direction? They're like, they can't say it goes in the right direction, but they felt comfortable that we were, not way off the mark on it. So I think,
We just wish it went further.
yeah. But I think it's generally, they're not gonna, I don't think they're gonna be opposing it, is probably where they're gonna be, so. Like maybe a little left of neutral.
Will this rule, do you envision any adverse economic impact for the region with this rule at all?
I don't think so. I think the proposal is very fair. And these are, in terms of, what we're gonna be removing in terms of their holdings, I think it's a reasonable proposal. And we do allow this common ownership provision in there. But I think it's very balanced, and I think it's, consistent with what we've done in the past for shutdowns.
Well, in essence, isn't the methodology?
That's not exactly answers the question with regard to economic impact. If they'll accept it, if its balance is different from whether there is an economic impact or not.
Yeah, I honestly, it's hard for to say. I don't know, I'm not an economist. I'd have to talk to, but I think one point was that by removing the smaller facilities, the table 7 and 8 facilities, I think that really takes that burden off in terms of the economic burden, in terms of a facility. It's like, if we started looking at those facilities, and if they had sold these infinite year blocks and having to go and purchase credits onto the market and their ability to purchase that, I think that becomes a little more difficult for them. But the focus is on these larger facilities, and when we looked at that part of the market, and when we look at these smaller facilities in terms of their impact, in terms of delaying controls for the larger facilities, that it's just, you would need on average 40 of these smaller facilities to delay controls for an average refinery. And that's what we're going to be presenting, and we looked at that analysis.
They also ran the REMI model, and there were very, very small potential jobs lost. So it didn't have a big number of job impacts, and I don't recall what the cost was, but there's an annualized cost that's put in there as well. So it was,
Thank you.
it's in the analysis, so you can take a look at that as well. But
Isn't one of the reasons part of this came up, as I recall in the discussion, is that the district didn't want companies to profit on initial credits that were given to them in the first place, and which I guess you could term that as an economic impact, that, you know, I can't sell what I got for free, but the other side, it looks like you almost applied a depreciation methodology to it, the credit reduction, that it's essentially, I thought, pretty ingenious in how you did that, that there's still allowing for that process to be there. You haven't taken everything, so my hat's off to staff. I thought that was a really good methodology in how you came up with that.
Kurt, is there anything from closed session, so we can finish the agenda and then we'll?
No, I think there will be some closed session items, but.
Wasn't there some
Maybe the board
development in
meeting
the
with
world logistics case
Yeah.
recently? I can't remember. They got some little chunk settled or something, and I should know this, I'm sorry.
No, there was a ruling on the initiatives lawsuit.
Oh.
There were 2 lawsuits against the World Logistics Center, a CEQA lawsuit, and the developer had used the initiatives process to avoid CEQA, and they got a favorable ruling. That's been about a month ago.
That must have been what I remembered.
Yeah.
I didn't remember.
Okay, so we'll go back to the front of the agenda. There are actually a few items that are still outstanding. One is the minutes, item number 1, and then we have some monthly reports, the Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Review Committee, item 30, and the ARB, the CARB board meeting monthly report, item 31, are still coming, and then the package for item 34 and 36. So those should be coming very shortly to you. We're just working on finishing those up. So we will go through the agenda. Any questions on the front page?
Is this the NSR, that kind of a routine thing?
Which one?
The
sorry.
PM 2.5 new source review?
Yeah, actually, basically, they need to lower the threshold for particulates as a major source because of attainment classification changes.
So from the 100 tons
Yes.
to 70?
Right, but they're not expecting too many impacts because really, when we had a 100-ton threshold for PM 2.5, the only potential facilities that would trigger that would be the power plants. And I think we had one that came in and took a lower limit. And so they would probably be able to figure out how to get under the 70 tons as well. So we don't think that that's going to have much of an impact. So that's what that set hearing is about.
Is it possible to define a source as including an indirect source under this?
What do you think?
Let's say world logistics. I mean, would it be possible, for example, to define source in such a way so that this rule would capture a source like that for ammonia, say?
I'm not completely following you, Mark. So that an indirect source would have to go through new source review. We don't have the ability to permit indirect sources. So I'm not sure. Even if you did, that it would accomplish anything.
If you did, and you found that they were a significant source of ammonia, then you could ask for them to, if they fell under this, then they might have to get offsets, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, since we don't have, there's a Attorney General opinion that says we don't have the ability to permit indirect sources. So in the absence of that, it's just not fruitful. I don't think a fruitful path for us to pursue.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you?
Yeah, Mark, there is a guidance document from EPA that does include the type of area sources that may be included as part of this. So we specifically looked at dairies But in the guidance that's provided by EPA, dairies are not included, but it does have a list of equipment that includes smeltering plants, chemical processing plants. There's a whole list here of the different operations that could have fugitive emissions that would be included as a part of the major source or modification to a major source definition.
But don't they have to be a typical stationary source to
They have to
begin
be,
with?
it's not indirect, so,
Then you
so it doesn't
apply this.
include, does not include like truck traffic or anything like that,
So it couldn't include dairy anyway, because dairy would
because it's
be-
not specifically listed.
Exactly.
It's only what's specifically listed.
Got it.
And granted, this guidance is 20 years old, but it would, apparently it would take an act of Congress literally to change the list.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's what EPA told us.
Contact the congressman.
Yeah, they got nothing.
Oh,
You know,
congresswoman,
I just did this morning.
Just want to throw that in.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so moving on to page 3, we're into the Matthew Saddle territory.
So item number 3 is to recognize revenue for a fuel cell truck. This was a project that was, the Department of Energy, one of the original respondents fell out of the project. They were acquired by a different company, and that company no longer wanted to pursue trucks or plug-in hybrids. So we are now working with a company called Hydrogenics, a really fairly well-known stack provider in the bus industry, to do fuel cell heavy-duty trucks. It's a Class 8 truck. They're leveraging off of an existing Energy Commission grant, and we're also recognizing funds from the Ports Technology Advancement Program to help co-fund the program.
I have a question. Really, maybe directed more over here. If they, Hydrogenics, if they take the technology, do they get the patent?
They have patents on all their technology.
But aren't they developing a new technology?
They're integrating it into a Class 8 heavy-duty chassis.
I guess my question is, not just here, but in every case that we do a demonstration with a company, whether it's our money or other folks' money,
Brad, to answer your, I think I know where you're going. Our contracts have a provision in it that says that we retain the intellectual property rights. So,
oh, we do?
Yeah.
What do we do with that?
what do we do with it when, the only instances where we've developed intellectual property is in connection with software. And it was software that we shared with other public agencies. So we granted other public agencies a license to use the software.
But if we and other folks provide funding to a company to develop technology, which they subsequently do a technology transfer and start commercializing, that company would probably have the patent. Once they develop it, would they not have the patent on that piece of
Well,
equipment?
they'd have to apply for the patent.
Being that they developed the technology, they probably would get the tech. I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious about that, because seemingly if they, here's what I was wondering about, is if we provide funding to a technology, they develop it and they begin to commercialize it, should we maybe have a little thing in there saying, well, we'd like to get our money back after
Yeah,
you.
and again, our contracts say that.
Okay.
So we try to negotiate that with every technology vendor. And to the extent we're successful, we put in the contract, and oftentimes we're not, because we're working with large corporations that don't. But they already have the IP, they already have the patents, and we're just helping them with the demonstration. So, but that was been a direction from the chair, and so every contract that we do, we broach that subject. Item 4 is.
Can I ask a question about
Go ahead.
what this one is? A couple points. Do you have any estimate of the time frame that might be required to move in this direction? My first question. I realize that's a forecasting question. Secondly, does this company have the capability and interest in, if they're able to positively demonstrate, do they have significant production capacity, or would you have to look to other manufacturers to actually do significant production?
Yeah, so for the first question, you're asking really forecasting for commercial viability, and that's really what this project and some of the other ones we're entering into to determine whether it can be a product. So these are really proof of, not concept, but proof of product type projects where we're gonna demonstrate and make sure it fits a duty cycle, that, they'll be running it in an actual drayage truck duty cycle at the port. So we'll see if it can withstand the demands of that duty cycle. The second question about whether they have the capacity, Hydrogenics is a staff manufacturer, but they're partnering with a major truck manufacturer. In this case, it's Daimler. So it's Daimler Trucks, Freightliner. It's the biggest truck manufacturer in North America. So the hope is that if this proves successful, then Freightliner would just take that package and be able to incorporate it into their product line. That would take, it would take some effort still, but it's more than, it's closer than just working with an integrator, someone that doesn't have a truck manufacturer partner. Any other questions? Okay, item 4, transfer appropriate funds for EFMP website. So this is our Replace Your Ride program. It's been very successful. There's a waiting list. In order to help streamline the program, we're taking some of the administrative funds and dedicating it for development of a website so the consumer can go on the website, upload their documents, and then we can also track the progression of their application through the website. So it's not just a forward-facing website, it also gives some back-end and data capability. We're also asking for some funding for the call center because a lot of this requires case management. You've got to follow the application and then some set aside for things like outreach later on down the line. We may need outreach. Right now we don't. Any questions about that? Okay, item 5 on the next page is to recognize funds for development of the ultra-low natural gas engine. You may recall that we're doing this 0.02 gram, 12-liter Cummins Westport heavy-duty engine, natural gas engine. Originally, we partnered with the Energy Commission, and the Energy Commission said, well, we'll give you $1 million, which we already received, and then they were going to contract another $1 million separately with the engine manufacturer. They've finally come to the conclusion that it's too difficult to do that, so they're going to give us the other $1 million. So we're just taking what they originally proposed to fund, we're going to incorporate it in our contract.
Are any other manufacturers working on a similar engine?
There are, but they're smaller, like Roush is doing a 6.7 liter, I think, and Ricardo and others are working on smaller engine sizes, more for the light medium duty market. This is really going after the Class 8 drayage truck market.
I have a quick question, and not to beat the contract issue to death, but this is more like a research and development type contract, or because it's not necessarily a demonstration project like the first one. Is that correct?
It's a development and certification project.
Okay, so in that case, if we participate in that, would there be, once this is commercialized by that, is there an opportunity in our contract then to get our initial investment back because they hadn't developed all the patents and technology before they went to demonstration? I'm just trying to.
Whenever we're getting really shaky ground when we start talking about reserving IP or license, or reserving the right to maintain the IP for hardware and for things of that nature, because the main reason is then you won't get the big companies to contract with us because they don't want to have to give up any IP. And so historically, we don't do that because then we won't have any contract. we won't be working with the people that need to scale.
But isn't this, would the big company walk away from developing that technology just because they don't want to enter into that type of an agreement? In other words, they'll only do the development if we provide some money, otherwise they would walk away?
Yes.
Well, I said they would not do anything.
Yes.
Okay. That seems a little odd if they're looking down the road for, coming in with a product which they're going to be creating a revenue stream.
The large manufacturers look at business as usual, right? So if we're trying to displace diesel technology, the incumbent technology, they have no impetus whatsoever to look at electric or hybrid or fuel cell. And the only way you get them involved is if you almost fully pay for their research and development.
They're not
Otherwise, there's a regulation.
they're not necessarily seeing a market that they're getting excited about. It's basically us
There is no
convincing them.
market.
Right. So that's why they probably wouldn't do it.
The only, yeah, and this is, lessons learned from 15 years of doing this. The only way you get the large manufacturers to enter into agreements with us, develop new technology, is if they see a market, and they don't see a market now, or if you provide enough funding that there's a tipping point and they can convince their upper management to go forward with the project. But to answer your question for that, we'll have that discussion with them, say,
Sure.
and the way we do it is if you are wildly successful and profitable, would you consider repaying the public agency for the amount of public funds that were invested in?
Right, yeah, it's not that you're asking for a chunk of the profit, it's just, okay. Thank you.
Number 6 is, this is the EPA STAR grant, which is Science to Achieve Results. So we applied for the STAR grant almost 2 years ago to develop low-cost sensors and deploy in environmental justice communities. We just recently received word that we were awarded that. It's about $750,000, and we'll be deploying sensors with cooperation from UCLA and Sonoma Technologies, and we'll be going to 6 different communities throughout the state of California, deploying the sensors, showing them how to use the sensors, how to interpret the data, and then we'll be also developing like lessons learned and education package along with that. By the way, we are also providing significant cost share for this program, almost 2 times what the EPA is giving us. And this is through our AQ SPEC program, our air quality sensor performance evaluations. Any questions on that? Then I think Fred can take the next 2 items.
Yes, the next item is our annual year 18 Carl Moyer Program Awards. We have $3 million in multi-district funds granted from ARB. That's based on the MOU between CAPCO and ARB that multi-district projects are implemented 1 year by Bay Area AQMD and the following year with us. So this year is our turn. In addition, we have about $25 million as our portion of annual Moyer funds. So altogether, we have about $32 million in evaluated and recommended projects in this board letter. The important thing to mention about this is that first, we have a variety of projects, including on-road transit buses, shore power, marine vessels, agriculture, off-road equipment, and construction off-road equipment. The way we have done the awards is that we have given priority to projects in EJ areas, and so the cost effectiveness limit of the program is $18,260. So we have gone to the maximum cost effectiveness level and awarded all EJ projects first. After that, then we have looked at other projects based on cost effectiveness, and since we were greatly oversubscribed, we were able to go only up to $13,000 cost effectiveness limit and award projects. We also have a list of backup projects up to $16,000 cost effectiveness, because throughout the year about 10 to 15% of the projects fall through. So instead of spending time and coming back to the board, through the committee and board process and all that, these backup projects based on their cost effectiveness will be selected as substitutes if any projects fall through. We have about $4 million in backup projects, which would be plenty. So that's the main points of this regular year 18 Moyer awards. Any questions? The next one is a locomotive project with the DERA funds. We have been awarded back in June, $500,000. It's part of a project. It's basically the Proposition 1B funds allow leveraging with DERA funds. And when we were evaluating this project and got awarded with the DERA funds for locomotive projects, this is something that first we went to the board back in July, got the funding for Proposition 1B for about $1.1 million. And then this one is basically to amend that contract to add the DERA funds that we have been awarded. And also there was some adjustment about $100,000 under calculations with ARB to add $100,000 more Prop 1B funds So the total funding for this locomotive project will be $1.7 million for a Tier 4 replacement engine.
Questions for Fred?
Where's this locomotive gonna be used?
This is at the port area.
In another presentation at that little assembly hearing yesterday on transportation, Metrolink's gonna start deploying their Tier 4 locomotives. Soon, I guess they're gonna be the first passenger rail in the country to deploy Tier 4s.
Yes, the Metrolink project, actually we funded that. We have put $110 million in that. And last month, Wayne Ashley was there with our, and Supervisor Nelson was the MC from the Metrolink. The first locomotive is already delivered. Out of a total of 20 we're going to do.
Very cool.
Great, thank you. All right, next, Mike, you've got the next several items.
Sure, I'll be brief on these. They're pretty administrative in nature and somewhat routine. The first one's requesting authority to execute a contract for our energy management system that controls the HVAC system in the building. The cost is $2,700 a month. Any questions on that one? Okay, the next one is to execute a contract for the biennial audit of the motor vehicle registration revenues. So this is basically the $4 that are authorized in DMV fees from AB 2766. The Health and Safety Code requires that any agency that receives those monies has to be audited every 2 years on the use of those monies. Just as a reminder, that $4 gets split out between cities, counties, MSRC, and the South Coast AQMD. We're requesting a contract with Simpson & Simpson. They performed the audit last time, and they know the program very well. Are there any questions on that? Okay. Next item's amendment of the current lease agreement with the City of Diamond Bar for use of our facility. So they use our auditorium at night for their city council meetings. It's about $2,200 a month, and there's some benefit in continuing to have a relationship with the city when you have parking variance needs and things like that as well. So in addition to the $2,200 a month, we receive.
I have a question about that. And actually, it's funny you should mention that, because one of the board members raised the question about the lease agreement next time that it was negotiated, because the district was having some issues and problems with the city approving some of the signage for its alt fuel facilities. So I'm wondering if that issue has been resolved, and if that ought to be addressed prior to the lease agreement being approved.
Yeah, so we've met with the city about signage. The next step is they want us to hire a civil engineer to design and do where the placement of the signs would go on the roads. But before we do that, we want to make sure that the vendor is going to be sustainable. As you may know, the Honda is no longer making the Civic natural gas vehicle. And so the vendor here, we're going through some iterations with their contract on whether or not they would put in new equipment, use the old equipment. So before we put up permanent signs, we want to make sure that there's actually going to be a natural gas station.
Is there going to be an issue with hydrogen signage?
Shouldn't be. I mean, the signs that we were going to put are going to say natural gas, hydrogen, electricity. It's going to have every alt fuel that we offer.
Okay, so the city is being unreasonable or not being unreasonable at this point?
I think they're being reasonable.
Okay.
And it's a 10-year agreement, which is kind of long, but we have a 1-year notice for cancellation for any cause for both parties, so we can get out of it if the board wants to later on. Any more questions on that item? Okay. The next item is to execute a lease and maintenance agreement for our printing equipment and copiers. So this is a result of an RFQ or RFP. We're selecting the vendor with the highest tech score and the lowest cost. They did the best job on the print job that we gave to them. Be happy to answer any questions on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, Kurt, you're next for the next couple items.
Sure. This first item is to inform the board that we've got over $20 million in a fund that is created pursuant to Rule 1118, which regulates flaring at refineries. If the refineries flare over limit specified in the rule, then they're required to pay into the fund. The money's been accumulating for a number of years. We're proposing to hold public workshops out in the areas near the refineries to solicit ideas that we'll then bring back to the board and propose that the board release RFPs regarding those topic areas. The rule says that the monies have to be used for mitigation. So there are some limitations on the kinds of projects that can be financed with these funds, but I think the kinds of things that the community has been interested in, monitoring health effects, those are all areas where the monies are eligible to be spent.
What is your time frame for these meetings and to bring back to the board?
I don't know.
It'll be pretty soon, Deborah. I mean, we're out in the process now with a smaller amount, the 2.77, specifically to the ExxonMobil, wrong E-word, ExxonMobil penalties for their fire. So we're out with that process, so we'll probably do this in the next few months.
I understand ExxonMobil, where those funds should be spent probably close to the refinery, but on the flaring issue, I took a look at the last 9 years of SO2 significant peaks readings, and there aren't that many days, and even on the worst day in the last 5 or 6 years, it's significantly below the federal standard. So my question is, how impacted is, say, Long Beach by flaring? I mean, and why isn't that money really used for a project? You know, it's focused more on areas that, for instance, Mira Loma, where you could possibly use that in the Mira Loma area to help us meet the PM 2.5. I find it interesting that we caught mitigation because it seemed like really more incentive. I know in 2005 when the rule was amended, mitigation is a nice word, but it doesn't seem like truly mitigating anything, really. It's almost like an excess emission fee. Isn't that basically what it is, an excess emission fee?
No, I don't think that's accurate. I think it's an alternative to complying with the rule limit. So, and to your point
Well,
about
it's an incentive to the refineries, possibly, to comply with the rule.
well, I mean, they can either comply or they can pay the fee, right? And they blow through the limit, they're required to pay
Well,
the
here's my
fee.
question. What is the damage to, say, I'm gonna take Long Beach because it seemed like they were the ones who had the highest SO2 readings occasionally, you know, once or twice a year, which I'm assuming is from flaring. What is the impact to the community if they flare?
The SO2, you're outside my area of expertise now, Ron,
Well,
but they're particulate impacts, I think,
Yes,
from,
that's what I was gonna say. You're right, we are in compliance
Particulates
with
may
this.
be transported down to Mira Loma or into the inland empire.
the concentrations certainly are gonna be greatest in the area near the
Well, I think
refineries.
the SO2 is, yes.
And the particulate from the SO2 as well. The other thing too that I wanted to mention, Ron, the rule specifically says that in deciding where the monies are to be spent, we're to consult with the communities and refineries. I think the rule really contemplates that those monies will be spent in the communities affected by the refineries.
And I understand that, but being that I now am a consultant with Larry in the Inland Empire, it seems to me that most of these monies are in the west side of LA County, and yet the problem for most of the ambient particulate and ozone is transport. And it just seems like kind of like these little communities are really getting the bulk of the monies, and I don't know how much emission reductions and which can really be related to improved air quality is happening with the.
Yeah, I don't know you'd have a very good time convincing people who live near the refineries
Because they see
they're
it
not impacted by
as kind of a slush
particulate.
fund that they can
Wow.
tap into. I mean,
What
I don't
I
need to
add is,
be argumentative, but it just seems like everyone lines up in those little communities, and then the areas that really have the problems, to the east, all the way down the Coachella Valley. Oh, well.
Well,
Can I
Ron?
ask
An example that I wanted to point out was the Sentinel plant. In that case, the board decided
That
that
makes
that money, the
sense.
53 million, was used in and around
I
that
see.
community.
I see,
So
that makes
it's-
sense. The gas problem makes sense, the Exxon Mobil, but when, for example, when the utilities, if they ever do it, exceed their limit and they have to pay, well, those emissions zoom all the way over to the Inland Empire and the foothill communities of LA County get nailed.
Ron?
It's obviously up to the board to.
Right, just look at the air quality
Yes,
and
Go ahead.
generally the communities in the west part of LA County have pretty good air quality.
Right, most of that money in there is actually from ExxonMobil, and I can tell you that when they had the recent flaring incidents, I was getting emails from folks, one telling me about how her daughter was having burning eyes, she was having headaches, and about other neighbors having headaches. So clearly, while these incidents were occurring, and that's where the money comes from, there's something going on there.
Okay. I'll be quiet.
Oh, of course. Go ahead.
Not too long ago, I think back in March, we had some funds that were not being spent in all the communities that it had initially been designed for, so we broadened it and said, hey, this can now go into the Inland Empire. If we meet with this community and you've got $20 million and what parses out is there's $15 million here, is there an opportunity then to say, okay, we have largely addressed the needs now, can we open this up to deal with issues outside this immediate community? I mean, is there anything that would prevent that from occurring?
I think that's up to the board.
Right, so there is an opportunity for, because I work for an inland board member too, for some of those dollars to be spent dealing with transport issues and in the IE if that's available.
So actually, I'm gonna be quiet, I just wanna make one last comment. For that little girl who has stinging eyes, this is not gonna mitigate her stinging eyes, so the next time ExxonMobil flares, her eyes are gonna be stinging. So that's why I have a little problem with the term mitigation, because it's not mitigating anything. It's just creating a fund of, a sum of monies that will be used for projects. It's not mitigating the stinging eyes, because they're not gonna stop the future flaring activity. Would you agree with that?
Wow.
Yes, in part, but I would also say since what they're looking for are warning systems also, it enables them to take
Protect their
cover,
children.
close their windows, et
Sure.
cetera. So it
And some of
reduces the
indoor-
actual.
And some of the indoor air quality pollution measures that can be taken
Sure.
as a result of the funding.
Yeah, new filters.
Okay.
Okay.
And,
Move on.
the next item is real straightforward. It's to appropriate $500,000 for attorney's fees.
Any questions on that?
What's our expected rate of return?
Not good.
I didn't bring my crystal ball with me. Okay, and then we're back to Mike for item 15.
Thanks again. Just quickly, this item's requesting authority to approve amendments with the employee groups and the unrepresented groups to authorize $45 a month towards the health insurance premium increases in calendar year. Happy to answer any questions on it.
This process has been actually really good, and we're hearing good feedback from our employees that they appreciated us being able to talk to them in advance of having to make decisions on which healthcare to choose next year, so this has been really good. Okay, the next item is an MSRC. I don't remember, do we have somebody that normally speaks to that item? Yeah. Okay.
No.
All right, so basically this is, you can see the awarding contracts and changes to contracts for things that the MSRC has done, and they're gonna seek the board approval. So this one I'm not real familiar with, but if there's any questions, we can try and follow up with you on that.
Just a comment, you were at the board retreat, weren't you, Ruth Ann?
I'm
The
sorry?
MSRC
Yes.
The MSRC retreat?
Yes, I was.
Ray Gorski had a good point, we've got $40 million to spend over the next 2 years. And as far as deploying new technologies, the delta between, current clean engines and other is
much smaller.
So it's kind of, what do we want to spend that money on that's going to be most effective? It's just deploying the newer equipment, the delta is so small that the cost effectiveness kind of goes out the window. So sort of philosophically, what behaviors do we want to change, or
what kind of projects do they want to implement that?
Which is a discussion that goes on every year at the MSRC board retreat.
Okay.
And
They never get any
am I
farther
wrong,
than
Matt? It's the same discussion that they've had for dozens of years, and it's really just where do they, and the whole idea of the retreat was an opportunity for them to throw out different ideas, and they have come up with creative spending, with the event centers, for example, and what they've done with the Dodgers and at the special event centers, and they're looking at other ways to do that, but that was part of where that discussion germinated from.
That was only my second or third one, so still new-ish.
Sounds great. Okay, so then we're on to the information-only reports for receiving and file. Do we have questions on the legislative public affairs report? Hearing board report? Okay, any of the reports on page 8?
Anything interesting with rule and promulgated forecast? Anything interesting on the horizon?
Do you know anything, Susan, of interest on the rule and control weather forecast at this
For
point?
the end of the year, Tracy's gonna be bringing 1302 and 1325, in November. And, I don't think we have anything for December. And then so we're working on the rule forecast for 2017. 2019, we pushed to February, March, to address the stakeholder issues.
And at the last meeting we had here, Phil had said that you were almost done with the TBAC analysis. And I guess the next step would be, I don't know if Phil had said you were going to take that back to stationary source, but I know that the plan was to be all queued up and ready by the time OEHA, the SRP heard that item. So what's the status and what's the plan going forward?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the status is on the TBAC issue. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Thanks, Susan. Any other questions on any of the items on page 8? Okay, and page 9 is the, anything from 25 to 31. Okay, and then I see Lockie's come up to talk to us a little bit about this draft action plan to get us out of our quagmire of permit application backlog.
And I'm standing between you and your lunch, so I'll try to be brief on this. So you all know that over the years, we have accumulated a pretty sizable permitting backlog. And I was assigned the easy task to take it down. We've been nurturing this for the last, 3 decades perhaps. So we brainstormed over the last couple of months or so with our staff all the way from the bottom to the top, feedback from our stakeholders, and we put a fairly comprehensive action plan together for several goals. First, to bring the backlog down as quickly as possible. Second, issue permits on a timely manner and improve our customer service and transparency. And when I do all these, we are keeping the environment whole. So for those of you who want to go through the action plan, we're giving a lot of statistics about the backlog and what fraction of those pending applications are truly the backlog, aging applications versus the working inventory, to make the long story short, it's a fairly sizable number. And in order for us to tackle that problem, we'll have to enhance our permit processing capacity and permit processing efficiency, both aspects together. So the action plan recognizes a number of measures to accomplish that. First and foremost, in terms of improving our permit processing capacity, we are gonna be using our existing staff resource a lot more efficiently. More active management, more active supervision, bring the chronic high vacancy rates down. We have been nurturing 20 to 30% vacancy rates in the past, and that has contributed to the backlog, over the years. So with Wayne's approval, we are bringing that down now to 8%, perhaps even a little bit lower. But certainly we'll have to work our staff a little bit harder. We are going to be expanding our 40-hour work schedule, perhaps to 50 hours to get that job done. And if necessary, we are also exploring scenarios where we need to hire on a temporary basis external help or permanent help. But very importantly, as I said, in addition to those additional sets of eyes and hands to work on the permits, we need to invest a serious effort in improving our efficiency, which is the other side of the coin. And we identify a series of measures there. And I'm not going to spend too much time on going through those. You guys can go through the action plan. But the main one is we need to invest seriously on automation efforts, developing the online tools that will help not just our permit engineers, but also the public to get involved in perhaps processing some of their permits, at least the easier ones. The Bay Area has done this quite successfully. They spent close to a decade developing their system and millions of dollars, a lot of money. They're willing to share their system with us, so we are exploring to see to what extent we can transplant their system to us. It's not going to be an easy task. But meanwhile, we want to start developing our own tools regardless what happens. So we looked at two scenarios and we are going to be seeking some direction from the board to figure out how to tackle this problem. One scenario seeks to enhance our efficiency by 25%, and we can reasonably assume that we can tackle this problem in 2 years. And the other scenario is exploring the 1-year scenario to do it in half the time. They're coming with different price tags. The first one, the 2-year scenario, we fully rely on our existing staff, just working them harder, and it comes at a cost of $2.2 million for 2 years, per year for 2 years. While the other one will have, under the second scenario, the 1-year scenario, we'll have to hire a sizable number of temporary engineers, and the price tag is close to $12 million. So we are going to be seeking some direction in terms of which way they want to go. We asked the same question to the Station Resource Committee, and I hope I'm not taking it out of context, but at least the message that I got was they're inclined towards the first scenario, the 2-year scenario, because it was a lot more cost effective. And we had a permit streamline subcommittee meeting yesterday. Some of the feedback that I got there too, they are saying, they're probably the first scenario is a lot more reasonable cost-wise. But both scenarios.
Were you just getting to the IM cost?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Both scenarios also include an investment for the automation, which will cost us close to $1 million per year for the next 5 years. It's a lot less than what the area spent, but we think that we can learn from some of their mistakes. And as you know, we can move a lot faster and a lot less costly. But we view this automation as a must-do thing, because if we want to make some of our gains that we are going to experience permanent and reach the 21st century, we have no choice but to go in that direction. We started implementing some of our measures in the plan. So we had some pretty good first 2 months. So our backlog has come down by 14% from 7,300 open applications down to less than 6,300 and we hope the trend will continue. Debbie?
So this is great news, and I know this is something that Supervisor Antonovich is very pleased to see finally. It's been something he's been pounding his head against the wall for most of his tenure on the board, and as he's getting ready to depart from the board, this is very important to him to see it moving forward. Couple quick questions. So, and not to simplify it, but it, you know, on the online portion of it, and I haven't looked, so is there a way, as we're looking at transparency, for people to be able to monitor the progress?
Yes.
Kind of like, you know, if
Thank
you
you.
order a pizza, it sits there and tells you,
Thank
oh,
you.
it's in the oven, oh, it's
Thank you.
on the, getting in the box, oh, it's being delivered. Is there a way for
Yes.
somebody to figure out
Thank you.
where their permit is?
As part of our transparency measures, we are going to be committed to develop 2 tools. One is already developed. First of all, we are going to be given a bar chart that shows our progress on a monthly basis. You know, whether things are going down, up, whatever they
But I
are.
mean, on specific, on their own.
Yes, I'm coming to that. The second commitment. So the first one, we are pretty much ready to deploy in a matter of days. The second one, we want to develop an online tool where it will allow the applicant to know at any given time where his application is, at what step, and what is needed to be done.
Kind of like, yeah, and it can
Kind
know
of
how
like-
long it's been, or like tracking UPS.
Tracking
like,
UPS,
it's
exactly.
like
And
knowing
that's the
where-
analogy that I've been using, you know, with my staff, you know, and that's a commitment to.
And will it also show how long it has stayed at each stage?
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of cities that are local jurisdictions that
Right.
through their permitting process do the same thing, whether it's,
Right.
you know, their construction plans
Right.
and that's been pretty successful
Correct.
from
Right.
the
Because
development
right now,
community standpoint.
when an applicant, you know, submits an application to us, they know who the engineer is, but it goes to a black box and they have no idea, you know,
Right.
where exactly, you know, they're. And
Exactly. And then the second, I think you touched on that already, is the concern that we have is that if in 2 years, which is very ambitious, we're able to clear out this backlog, then the next thing is to make sure that we never, ever have
Yes.
that type of a problem again.
Yes.
And to
Yes.
work in, and I think with these issues that you're talking about, that we can make sure that that's going.
It is an ambitious plan, but I feel it is an optimistic plan, but I think it's also realistic. If we work hard enough and we stay focused, we'll get it done. But to make it sustainable, just like you said, and not necessarily, you know, have it look, you know, going back up again, we need to invest in those automation tools. Without them, I don't think we'll be successful in the long term.
And then the last question I had is, we've had some permits that have been sitting forever.
Yes.
And we've got some that have not been as long. So as you're working at the backlog, are you prioritizing those that have been
Yeah.
sitting around for 5 years?
Yes.
And attacking those before, or are you just grabbing at them?
Good point, good question. So in the analysis that we conducted, we split those pending applications into sub-universes. One, the true backlog, those aging applications. And one, I'll call them the fresh applications or the working inventory. So clearly, the priority is in bringing the aging applications down. But my marching orders to staff was, you know, as embarrassing as it is, you know, and to have those aging applications, and as quickly and as fast as we want to reduce them, make sure that you don't ignore your fresh applications, because those are permit applications that the small business guy has, the dry cleaner, the guy who wants to open a dry cleaner or an auto body spray booth or an auto body shop, they're waiting for their application. So we cannot tackle the backlog in the expense of those little guys. And they can be larger guys too, you know, I'm not trying to discriminate here. So we have to tackle both. We can't ignore one at the expense, push one at the expense of the other. And we are, at least the first 2 months, it will show that we are making good progress on both fronts.
I'm sorry.
Question. With the automation that we put in place, that's fewer people that are coming to the district potentially to just turn in a simple application. And so have we thought about grabbing whatever emission reductions from that automation that might occur? Yeah, such as it is, but 6,000 fighting.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there'll be that benefit, foregone transportation related emissions, right? That's what you're
Right.
referring to.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely, that will be the bonus of
Sure,
that
sure.
effort, yeah.
I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to quantify that, but it's definitely gonna be a
But it
positive.
But you would
Yeah.
fairly quickly, if you get a sizable, application online that you're not seeing people come unless they have to, write a check or,
Right.
I mean, Caltrans does that, they do, you get a portal and you never see anybody again and in
I
some
don't know what
spots.
percentage come in physically
That-
versus mailed. I know we get a lot by mail as well.
That would be,
but
I'm just,
It's
just,
definitely a benefit.
just asking, and I think you
We'll
characterized
consider it.
the stationary source committee accurately. I think they were leaning towards that second scenario. The other part was, why are you paying so much money to hire temporary employees only to leave? Now, granted, that
Right.
makes them helpful, I guess, to the private sector that are hiring them, but I think
Right.
that they were struggling with part of that is
Yeah.
why,
Right, so,
Yeah.
if the last were my recommendation, it would be not to hire the external assistants and stay, with our.
fill your vacancies, but not hire the
Exactly,
temporary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if there is that burning desire, no, we want to do it faster, well, that's how much it's going to cost. I felt, we had to develop that scenario.
Jill, are we gonna have a standing, item on each agenda in regard to permit activity? Like number of permits, applications that came in?
We are committing to go to the Station Resource Committee on a quarterly basis.
On a quarterly basis? I seem to remember way back then, I'm really old. I remember a long time ago, there was always a standing, item on permit activity. Many, maybe decades ago.
Well, we will have something online that will be very clear for
Well, I
anybody.
mean, for the board to look
For the
at,
board.
because sometimes it's more, perhaps more of an incentive, if the board
Yeah.
members are observing, the permit activity. I think they'd like to have it.
Yeah, one of the things that Lockheed was recommending quarterly is because you can have some fluctuation. And there are times where when the fee rule goes into effect, we see a bump of incoming applications the month before, because if people can do that and save a couple percent, they're going to. So on a month-to-month basis, it might flatten it out. But if the board asked us to do that on a monthly basis, of course
I
we
know my
would.
guy
Yeah.
had to ask
Mhm.
about it, and it just seems like it's something that the board would like to look at and see the permit activity on a monthly basis, I don't know.
And this is also predicated on the 6,000 per year that we've seen coming in is gonna stay at 6,000. Now, we're always looking at Rule 219 and Rule 222 to pull things out of the permitting system and, make appropriate adjustments. But if the economy goes crazy and we see a lot more manufacturing and the permits come up, then it
But
could
that's
also
why a
affect
monthly
the
thing,
progress.
because you would have an explanation that we're seeing an increased economic activity, and it allows the board to make certain decisions in regard to resources, et cetera.
Do you know what, Ron, I'd much rather have the staff focusing on the permits than focusing on a monthly.
I don't think,
board.
I'm
We'll be
thinking a
tracking
one
it
pager that would
weekly,
show,
but yeah.
I mean, I don't think it'd be a lot of, work on this.
Let us think about it. I mean,
Okay.
we want to have something meaningful, to
Right.
each board member.
Because then they
not
won't look at it.
necessarily- Yeah, exactly.
We can
exactly.
also
That's my
put
fear.
in,
That's right.
What happened?
In the weekly reports that Wayne sends to the board would be another mechanism
Yeah,
to do that
okay.
rather than.
I'll look at them,
one
yeah,
item.
I look at them weekly. Let me tell you, I don't want to say daily, but and sometimes, you see a lot of noise there, and elongating the time a little bit, becomes a little more meaningful. But we are going to be developing, like I said, some online tools. We are going to be reorganizing our website. We want to put a lot of policies, the tools that we are developing for our staff. We want to share those with, our stakeholders, so that we all speak the same language, we all are at the same page, and they can use the same tools in preparing, their applications. So
This is gonna be a great initiative that we're gonna spend a lot of effort on to
Right.
really get this back under control.
I've got a question and a couple of comments.
Sure.
One is just really outstanding, comprehensive job, and I really enjoyed reading every page of that report. It was.
You must be one of the few ones who enjoys reading these kind of reports.
It's only for
But thank you,
it's
I
only
appreciate
34
that.
pages.
Yeah, but it feels like 100,
It's all
but the
relevant.
presentation is really good if you don't want to slug through the report.
Question, I've heard of a number of folks that have paid in the permit processing thing, the extra fee that you can pay to have an engineer work overtime, and then some people I've heard have paid the fee, but they've not gotten that extra service. And is this an issue that's going to be addressed as part of this?
It's not at the top of our priority list, but it is part of the action plan, to look at the XPP program, as we call it, the Expedited Permit Processing Program, because I heard it both ways. I mean, there is half of the universe, half the people taking advantage of the program who are quite happy, and there's the other half that are completely unhappy about it. So clearly, some of the permits, the folks who are paying extra to get the permits, they are not feeling that they're getting them fast enough, okay? So it needs to be addressed. We discussed briefly yesterday at our permit streamline subcommittee meeting, and I said, the reason why we didn't put it at the very top of our agenda was, if we are successful with our backlog reduction program, and we will be successful, and we start reducing those numbers down, all of a sudden we'll have a lot more free engineering hands, sets of eyes and stuff, and that we'll be able to deploy to that XPP program. And first of all, there may not be as much demand for the XPP, because now the permits are being processed a lot faster, and the few ones that we are going to be getting will have extra sets of hands, to tackle the permits. So some of the ills, if I may use the term, of the current program maybe automatically be cured, and if not, then certainly we need to take a comprehensive look and completely change the direction of the program.
Okay, I've used the process before, and it worked wonderfully for me.
So it's
I got a permit in 5 working days from the district.
Yeah.
But I know not everybody has that experience, and it's just kind of a
Is this for your
fairness issue.
Where we're ultimately trying to get to is when we get through this backlog, we want to have very clear expectations so that people know for the common types of permits that they get, if you're getting a boiler or an IC engine or a hydrocarbon dry cleaner, a typical processing time is X to Y weeks. And then they can make a decision on whether or not, okay, that's gonna work for me. And also we'll be able to tell them, if you do expedited permitting, on average, it slows it up, or it speeds it up by this percentage. So we've gotta get through all this, kind of get back to an even keel, but then that's something that we'll be able to offer people, and then try and make sure that we manage within those expectations and adjust our resources or whatever we have to do. So if we tell somebody, you're gonna get this permit in 90 days, of course it'll be, if there's no CEQA, if there's no public notice, and et cetera, but, just kind of a standard permit without some of these extra things to get it done, we'll have those expectations. And I also want to mention that for the XPP, there have been cases where we have refunded that portion of the fees when we haven't been able to provide that extra time savings for people. So we look at that on a case-by-case basis, and we have done that.
Secondly, well, I've got a challenge and an opportunity that you might want to think about. One is that, given what I heard at the BACT guidelines workshop, I think there may be some challenges with respect to the time it takes to get for BACT and potential challenges to the hearing board. So you ought to think about how you're going to deal with BACT determinations and the ability for the public to challenge those and allowing enough time in there. So just something to think about. And lastly, an opportunity. One thing that I've had clients of mine tell me in the past, that one of the biggest incentives that you can provide them to go the extra mile in terms of trying out new technologies. And we always try and think of incentives for us to give folks to try and form a new BACT or go beyond. But if you can find a way of moving a certain class of folks to the headline in terms of permit processing, that's a big deal for them.
Yeah.
It helps provide certainty and takes that time that normally wouldn't be productive for them and makes it productive. So something for you to consider. and
If
think
I
about.
understood you correctly, you're saying if we have some super compliant technology, or ultra low emitting technology, figure out some way to incentivize it by moving them to the top of the line, or even control technologies versus basic equipment.
Right.
Perhaps need to be prioritized. It's not something that we really spend much time, but I'll take the challenge, and once we start bringing those numbers down, perhaps we can reprioritize the way we deploy our resources and prioritize those type of applications first.
I don't understand quite when a person submits an application, say for a boiler or something, can they purchase that equipment based on the application, or do they have to wait?
They have to wait.
They have to wait until the permit is issued.
In theory, they have to wait till the permit is issued. But often, people won't even apply for a permit to construct. They just go ahead and purchase the equipment, and they decide to apply for a permit either because they got caught, by an inspector who happened to be driving by or stopping by, or out of their goodness of their heart, they decide to submit an application after the fact. It's like a Russian roulette. You are taking a risk because the equipment that you installed may or may not comply with our rules, and it complicates, the future viability of the business. But we do have quite a few open applications within our backlog that fall into that category.
But so if a person submits an application, then 2 years down the road, they have not gotten their permit, they're hung out to dry.
Well, that's why we are trying to resolve this problem, right? And this is why, as we try to address the backlog problem, and I hope it was clear enough, we don't want to ignore those fresh applications, right? That work in inventory and want to work on both fronts simultaneously and be successful on both fronts simultaneously, because they ought to be getting their permits on time. Okay? And as Jill said, even though there are clear timeframes, as to when we are supposed to issue the permit, for instance, it's the 180-day clock that we are using. From the time the application is being deemed complete, we have 180 days to issue the permit. Once we reduce the backlog, our next target will be, okay, take that 180 days and start shrinking it down. If we can go into those automation that I was talking about, our goal is to shrink that down as much as we can, as fast as we can, so these guys, can get their plans faster rather than later.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a short one here. In terms of working down the vacancy rate that you seem to have, I wonder if you have someone within your division dedicated to working on that issue, and or perhaps within human resources.
Yes.
Do you want to fill those vacant? Are you doing outreach, shall I say, to other air pollution districts, to consultants, to higher education institutions? Do you have internship programs with higher education? I realize that's a broad question, but where's your focus at the moment?
Sure. Well, you're looking at the two people, working on that vacancy rate, as well as the gentleman back there, the two gentlemen back there.
Okay.
So we are all working together as a team in opening those applications, conducting the outreach, and inviting applicants in. And typically, we'll get a fairly sizable pool of applicants from which we can select from. And we are well underway. In fact, we hired not too long ago, 6 + 1, 7 new engineers that helped us bring that vacancy rate down to 8%. One thing that I didn't mention over here is bringing the vacancy rates down is great. It will help us in the long term. Unfortunately, even if you hire an Einstein, the best engineer, at the first year, you don't get much mileage out of him, because what we do here with the permits is so esoteric. There are so many rules and regulations that they have to go through and interface that with the engineering knowledge. So the first year you get 30%, maybe the second year is 60 to 70%, and it's the third year, that you have them firing all 8 cylinders, So part of the action plan is to invest also in training to shorten that learning curve and get them to the 100% sooner rather than later.
I just want to add, one of the major things that I'm working on with our executive team is succession planning. And part of that is recruitment and retention of employees. So there's a larger effort going on, and part of that is not waiting until we have vacancies before we go out with the recruitment. So in the past, we have waited till we had 10 or 20 vacancies in the inspector or the engineer rank. Then we start the recruitment process, and you get hundreds of applicants, there's tests, and it takes months before you actually get them in the door. So we're gonna do a much better job in working with John and Mike to make sure that we have a list, and they're good for a certain length of time, but before that list expires, we know we've got an aging workforce and a tremendous amount of people exiting, that we're gonna be able to have those lists right on top of each other so that we'll have a good pool that we can pull from when we can get those vacancies. So we're down to about an overall 12% vacancy rate now. We've got, I don't know how many, 40 plus positions that we're in various stages of recruitment, and we're filling, pretty much as fast as we can. So we got ourselves behind that curve. We're kind of working to get through that, and that'll help us kind of come to a better balance in the long run. So that's all part of a much larger effort, but Lockheed's knocking on my door very often with, okay, when can we fill these? So we're moving ahead full steam. And Andy, did you have another question?
That pretty much answered my question. If there are young engineers out there who are
We
champions of
always
it.
get a very, very good pool of candidates, so it's great. Okay, anything else before we close? It's been a really robust and good discussion.
I've got a couple of things. One, I wanted to thank Susan and her staff with the commercial lawn mowing, electric lawn mowing equipment. We were having delivery to the city of Colton, and I think their school district, and then in our region it's the city of Waldemar, and we've got a school district, Lake Elsinore, and then the Harupa Parks and Rec district. So it was like pulling teeth a little bit to get some of those guys to commit, but I want to thank you and your staff for doing that. That was part of an EPA grant, wasn't it?
Yeah, the EPA, targeted air grant.
And for any of, it's met with a lot of success and interest in, at least in the Riverside area, and I think, and so those of you that want a demonstration or anything, you're going to apply for this again, and I know that all my guys are going to want to line up, but I want to thank you very much for all your help, because that was, you're trying to give them stuff, and it's still hard. And the other thing I wanted to ask about is perhaps to have an AQMP update back to this group. That I know there's been a lot of outreach, and staff has been making presentations everywhere, but you've been receiving comments all along the way, and I don't get all those comments, and I probably wouldn't be able to wade through them all to begin with, but just to kind of keep us up to speed as to what you're hearing, and we're sort of where we're going, and maybe we could do that.
We can request that for the next time. In the meantime,
great.
we had an AQMP advisory group meeting yesterday, and those slides are posted online, and there's a really nice 6 or so slides that Phil had to summarize all of the 60-something, I think 67 comment letters. So there's just a few slides there that would be helpful if you want to get a preview before next week. But basically, we're going to be releasing a revised draft of the AQMP, hopefully the end of next week, and it's going to come with a 2 or 3 page write-up that highlights what changes are going to be made or are being made. And basically, to put it just in the 1-minute summary, we've listened to the comments that people have given us, and there's going to be a lot of changes that are more emphasizing regulatory approaches, and within those regulations also have some incentive-based approaches. So we're listening a lot to the environmental community that we need to do more of a regulatory approach. Actually, some of the measures even will have a breakdown of what percentage of the emission reductions we expect to get from incentives versus the regulations.
Oh, that's good.
So there's a lot of that specificity. And so we are trying to pull that all together and respond. And then it'll actually be an underlined strikeout so that people can see. and then that'll go back out for another review period, and then there will be one more iteration. So it's still part of the process, and we're still listening and adjusting and trying to make changes.
Well, that would be great if you could,
Okay,
you
but
know,
we'll
do
request
that
and
next.
make sure that Phil can come
oh,
for
perfect,
the next,
thank you.
I'll check his schedule.
Thank you.
That would be a great thing to do. But that's kind of in a snapshot or a nutshell what we're looking at, so. And I don't know if you followed, there's requests from stakeholders on industry and environmental community side for delay. So we're still going with the approach that we're gonna make December. It's getting tight is what Phil is saying. So there is a possibility that we would delay that, and if we delayed it, we had requests yesterday, don't delay it 1 month because that means everybody's giving up all of their December time off and holiday and family time. So if it did get delayed, it would go to February, but that decision will be made shortly, or the recommendation will be made shortly, but we're still trying to do December.
Well, and if you're gonna delay, might as well make the delay meaningful to those folks requesting it. I don't know that 30 days would buy anybody anything.
No, we agree. So
Yeah.
if it doesn't go in December, then it would be February.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we adjourn then? Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
When it's recorded, is it immediately available? Or is it
My administrative
is it a missed call?
Hopefully this guy did
Yeah,
not.
your house did not burn down.
That's what you used to tell me.
Not really.
Yeah. And even so.
Yeah, just get the cat out.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, I will.
Yeah. Hey, Catherine.
Yeah.
That was
well, we're gonna change our look at the website. Start taking off that first to do that. So at this point, we're just.
I mean, the website was the same category.
See you later. I don't know, that's what it's about. Yeah, and there's only one. Which is Maria.
Well, this one down in,
No, they're off, they're working consultants. Yeah, the thought is there.
last month. We can bring it up. Like I said,
took over purpose for us, I think it's much more simple.
Like mechanical.
Well, I like that customer.
I got on, and I waited in bed, and they said the customer service is horrible. I sat there.
I don't know whose bag this
Hit
was.
once. He said, you know, they need to do something about this. He dragged on.
But when
So the rules moving, and it's like we're.
No, I think they're just more of a, bringing into being that, but more of like an industrial provider. What they, somebody told me the name yesterday, there's, you know, new webcast.
And then we're
Both days.
identifying.
The first day was okay.
It is.
Okay.
I won't forget.
Okay, 30 something. You're being healthy.
No bread, thank you. I realized I really started to put on some weight, and it's because I started eating bread again.
I sat
I'm trying to
after
wait,
Winchester.
that's a great challenge.
It's so hard.
Apologize, it's not you.
And I love
It's, we
dessert.
have horrible trouble with our new provider. I'm so sorry.
Because I had trouble with my laptop at work yesterday. It turns out
In their brains, and so what we were talking about doing.
There's something localized in
It's
my
kind of
laptop.
a
Yeah,
stage
yeah.
now
It was
where
trying
we're
to
identifying.
grab another IP or guess what I do. Had nothing to do with
No,
anything.
no, what I was
Just-
told yesterday, what was supposed to be a 2-hour fix is over 2 days. So, 2 hours is 4
This
days.
is a consumer.
No, it's terrible. Yeah, so what city is here in the new building?
I'm going to the site.
Your site, so
It's fine now.
Frontier has Riverside.
Yeah, we were Verizon.
Yeah, that's what everybody says when they jump over.
And I'm like,
I've seen Marianne lots of Frank, always.
what I mean is like,
I don't know.
spent $8 billion. It's like buying a horse and buggy.
Exactly.
This is yesterday's technology.
Yes, right.
And I love yesterday's technology, but it's all over.
I know what you mean. I know about the same age, I guess. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's just horrible PR for the company.
Their customer service.
Yeah.
You got somebody that they couldn't help you.
I sure hope. Well, I'll tell you what, Verizon's losing people. And telephones because of their phones. But I tell you what, if they go over to Frontier for telephone, they're done.
Well, actually,
I'm with Verizon.
I'm Verizon too, and my wife is still on Verizon.
Okay.
And, we have Verizon.
How's your service up there with Verizon?
Well, we have it
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they moved to town. This is a nice one. They moved to town.
So right.
So we lost Verizon. She, on a Verizon phone, she puts the phone in the left corner of the kitchen window, she can get a signal, she can talk, and then her phone died. So AT&T's up there, so I bought a Go phone when she went up there, you know, just a month, and it worked fine, except the phone quit working. I could hear her when she, yeah. I think I bought it at AT&T. So the phone quit working. I could hear her when she couldn't hear me. So we're like, and then she got a Verizon phone work, so okay, that's fine. And then the Verizon phone just died. So I just mailed her another AT&T phone. Hopefully it'll work.
Well, yeah, I was surprised in Saturday. And I could do Verizon anywhere in this building, pretty much except the basement. And that was 1994. Now, I can barely hold a call 30 seconds in that. And I'm like, I said, like, now, what you say, they must have used some stuff. So I'm thinking, if I'm dropping calls with Verizon, I might as well go with the cheaper plan and join the rest of everybody else that's dropping calls with, not Sprint, T-Mobile, and pay less money. And get unlimited. For one, I want to log on and just work football season, and I love to stream the highlights. And I can't with Verizon, so I'm afraid I'll go way over and then I'll have to pay a $300 bill, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I hear you. So they got us. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that we're just kind of meeting there, so that's where it's right.
You can do kind of both cases,
All right.
Okay, well, thanks.
Okay.